Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Chapter 3. The author studiouses to learn the language. The Houyhnhnm, his master, assists in teaching him. The language described. Several Houyhnhnms of quality come out of curiosity to see the author. He gives his master a sort of account of his voyage. My principal endeavour was to learn the language, which my master, for so I henceforth call him, and his children, and every servant of his house were desirous to teach me, for they looked upon it as a prodigy that a brute animal should discover such a mark of a rational creature. I pointed to everything and inquired the name of it, which I wrote down in my journal notebook when I was alone, and corrected my bad accent by desiring those of the family to pronounce it often. In this employment, a sorrel nag of one of the under servants was ready to assist me. In speaking, they pronounce through the nose and the throat. Their language approaches the nearest to the High Dutch or German of any I know in Europe, but it is much more graceful and significant. The Emperor Charles V almost made the same observation when he said that if he was to speak his horse, it should be in High Dutch. The curiosity and impatience of my master were so great that he spent many hours of his leisure to instruct me. He was convinced, as he afterward told me, that I must be a Yahoo, but my teachability, civility, and cleanliness astonished him, which were qualities altogether so opposite to those animals, and he was most perplexed about my clothes, reasoning sometimes with himself whether they were a part of my body, for I never pulled them off till my family were asleep, and I got them on when I waked in the morning. My master was eager to learn from whence I came, and how I acquired those appearances of reason, which I discovered in all my actions, and to my story from my own mouth, which he hoped he would soon do the great proficiency I made in learning and pronouncing their words and sentences. To help my memory, I formed all in the learned into English alphabet, and write the words down with translations. This last, after some time, I ventured to do in my master's presence, and it cost me much trouble to explain to him what I was doing, for inhabitants have not the least idea of books or literature. In about 10 weeks' time I was able to understand most of his questions, and in 3 months I could give him some tolerable answers. He was extremely curious to know from where part of country I came, and how I was taught to intimidate a rational creature, because the Yahoos, whom saw I exactly resembled in my head, hands, and face that were only visible, had some appearance of cunning and the strongest disposition to mischief, were observed to be the most unteachable of all brutes. I answered that I came over the sea, from a far place, with many others of my own kind, in a hollow great vessel made from the body of a tree. And my companions forced me to land on this coast, and then left me to shift for myself. It was with some difficulty, that by the help of many signs, that I brought him to understand me. He replied that I must need to be mistaken, or that I said the thing which was not, for they had no word in their language to express lying or falsehood. He knew it was impossible that there could be a country beyond sea, or that a parcel of brutes could move a wooden vessel whither they pleased upon the water. He was sure no Houyhnhnm alive could make such a vessel, and nor trust Yahoos to manage it. The word Houyhnhnm in their tongue signifies a horse, and in its etymology, the perfection of nature. I told my master that I was a loss for expression, but I would move as fast as I could, and hoped for a short time I would be able to tell him wonders, He was pleased to direct his own mare, his colt, in full, and the servants of the family to take all opportunities of instructing me. And every day for about 2 or 3 hours he was at the same pains himself. Several horses and mares of quality in the neighbourhood came often to our house upon the report spread of wonderful Yahoo, that could speak like a Houyhnhnm, and seemed in his words and action to discover some glimmering of reason. These delighted to converse me. They put many questions, and received such answers as I was able to return. By all these advantages I made so great a progress, that in 5 months from my arrival I understood whatever was spoke, and could express myself tolerably well. The Houyhnhnms, who came to visit my master out of a design of seeing and talking with me, could hardly believe to be a right Yahoo, because my body had a different covering from others of my kind. They were astonished to observe me without the usual hair or skin, except on my head, face, and hands. But I discovered that secret to my master upon an accident which happened about a fortnight after. I have already told the reader that every night, when the family were gone to bed, it was my custom to strip myself and cover myself with my clothes. It happened one morning early that my master sent for me by the sorrel nag, who was his valet, and came. I was fast asleep, and my clothes fallen on one side, my shirt above my waist. I awaked at the noise he made, and observed him to deliver his message in some disorder, which after he went to my master, in a great fright gave him a very confused account of what he had seen. This I presently discovered, for going as soon as I was dressed, to pay my attendance upon his honour. He asked me the meaning of what his servant had reported, that I was not the same thing when I slept and I appeared to be at other times. That his valet assured him some part of me was white and the other part yellow, and at least not so white, and some brown. I had hitherto concealed the secret of my dress, in order to distinguish myself as much as possible from that cursed race of Yahoos, that I now found it in vain to no longer do so. Besides, I considered that my clothes and shoes would soon wear out, which already were in a declining condition, and must be supplied by some contrivance from the hides of Yahoos or other brutes, whereby the whole secret would be known, and I therefore told my master that in this country where I once came, those of my kind always covered their bodies with the hairs of certain animals prepared by art, as well for decency as to avoid the inclemency of both air hot and cold, as to which my own person I would give him immediately conviction, as if he pleased to command me, only desiring his excuse, if I had not exposed those parts that nature taught us to conceal. He said my discourse was all very strange, but especially the last part, for he could not understand why nature should teach us to conceal what nature has given, that neither nor his family were ashamed of any parts of their bodies, but however I might do as I pleased. Whereupon I first unbuttoned my coat and pulled it off. I did the same with my waistcoat. I dressed up my shoes, stockings, and breeches, and let my shirt down to the waist. I drew up the bottom, fastening like a girdle about my middle to hide my nakedness. My master observed the whole performance with great signs of curiosity and admiration. He took up all my clothes in his pastern, one piece after another, and examined them diligently, stroked my body very gently, and looked round me several times, after which he said, it was as plain I must be a perfect Yahoo, but I differed very much from the rest of my species, in the softness, whiteness, and smoothness of my skin, my want of hair in several parts of my body, the shape and shortness of my claws, behind and before. In this affection of walking continuously on my two hinder feet, he desired to see no more, and gave me leave to put on my clothes again, for I was shuddering with cold. I expressed my uneasiness at his giving me so appellation of Yahoo, an odious animal, for which I had so uttered in hatred and contempt. I begged he would forbear applying the word for me, and take the same order in his family upon his friends whom he suffered to see me. I requested likewise that the secret of having a false covering of my body might be known to none but himself, at least, as long as my present clothing should last, for, as to what has Nag, his valet, has observed, his honour might command him to conceal it. All this is my master very graciously consented to, and thus the secret was kept till my clothes began to wear out, which I was forced to supply many several contrivances, and that shall hereby after be forced to be mentioned. In the meantime, he desired I would go on with my utmost diligence into learning their language, because he was more astonished at my capacity for speech and reason than at the figure of my body, whether it was covered or no, adding that he waited for some impatience to hear the wonders from which I promised to tell him. From thenceforward he doubled the pains he had been at to instruct me. He brought me into all company, and made them treat me with civility, because, as he told them privately, this would put me into good humour, and make me more diverting. Every day when I waited on him, besides the trouble he was at in teaching, he would ask me several questions concerning myself, which I answered as well as I could, and by these means he had always received some general ideas, though very imperfect. It would be tedious to relate the several steps by which I advanced in a more regular conversation. But the first account I gave of myself in any order or length was to this purpose, that I came from a very far country, as I already attempted to tell him, which was of about 50 or more of my own species, that we travelled upon the seas, in a great hollow vessel made of wood, and larger than his honour's house. I described the ship to him in the best terms I could, and explained by the help of my handkerchief displayed how I was driven forward by the wind, that upon a quarrel among us I was set on shore of this coast, where I walked forward without knowing whither, till he delivered me from persecution to those execrable Yahoos. He asked me who made the ship, and how it was possible that a Houyhnhnm of my country would leave it to management of brutes. My answer was, that I durst proceed no farther in my relation, unless he would give me his word and honour that he would not be offended, and that I would tell them the wonders I so often promised. He agreed, and went on by assuring him that the ship was made by creatures like myself, who, in all countries I had travelled, as well as my own, were only governing rational animals, and upon my arrival hither I was much astonished to see that Houyhnhnms acted like rational beings, as he or his friends could be finding some mark of reason in a creature he was pleased to call a Yahoo, to which I owned my resemblance in every part, but could not account for their degenerate and brutal nature. I said, farther, that if a good fortune ever restored me to my native country to relate my travels hither, as I resolved to do, everybody would believe I said thing which was not, and I invented the story out of my own head, and with all possible respect to himself and his family and friends, and under his promise of not being offended. Our countrymen would hardly think it probable that Houyhnhnm should be the presiding creature of a nation, and that the Yahoo a brute.